The tranquil veneer of Circleville, Ohio, once a picture of quintessential Americana, masked a simmering darkness. This was a place where everyone knew everyone, a close-knit community woven together by generations of shared histories and quiet, unassuming lives. Children played freely in sun-drenched parks and neighbors exchanged pleasantries over picket fences, a testament to the peace and normalcy that defined this idyllic town. No one could have predicted the chilling shadow that was about to fall, an unseen hand poised to tear apart the very fabric of their existence. It began subtly, with whispers that quickly morphed into a torrent of fear. Anonymous letters started appearing, tucked into mailboxes, left on doorsteps, or even found pinned to community bulletin boards. These weren't mere prank notes. Their content was disturbingly precise, targeting specific individuals and delving into the most intimate, often shameful secrets of their lives. Marital infidelities, clandestine affairs, hidden debts. Nothing seemed safe from the prying eyes of the sender. The letters were accusatory, their tone threatening, demanding immediate change and hinting at dire consequences if their veiled warnings were ignored. Initial reactions across Circleville ranged from confusion and disbelief to outright dismissal. Some residents scoffed, attributing the notes to a bored teenager with too much time on their hands. Others, however, felt a cold dread creep into their hearts, recognizing the insidious power of such personal revelations. Whispers of suspicion spread like wildfire, igniting old grudges and fostering new distrust. The town, once so united, began to fray at the edges, each resident wondering who might be next, and more terrifyingly, who among them held such damning knowledge. Among the first, and certainly the most prominent, targets was Mary Gillespie, a respected school bus driver whose daily route brought her into contact with countless families. Mary was known for her kind demeanor and unwavering professionalism, a pillar of the community. Yet the anonymous poison pen found its way to her, accusing her of an illicit affair with Gordon Massey, the school superintendent. The letters didn't stop there. They also reached her husband, Ron Gillespie, detailing the alleged transgressions with cruel, heartbreaking specificity. Ron, a man of quiet pride and deep devotion to his family, was utterly devastated. The letters became his tormentor, chipping away at his trust, his marriage, and his very sense of self. They grew increasingly aggressive, their threats escalating from exposure to veiled violence, demanding that he put a stop to his wife's supposed affair. Fueled by the letter writer's venomous words, Ron confronted Mary and Massey, his mind a whirlwind of pain and suspicion. He demanded answers, his once gentle eyes now clouded with a desperate fury that was entirely uncharacteristic. The pressure mounted unbearable and relentless. One fateful day, driven to the brink of despair and armed with a gun, Ron set out, determined to unmask his tormentor. He received a mysterious phone call, a shadowy voice guiding him to an isolated location, promising answers. What transpired there remains shrouded in mystery, but shortly after Ron Gillespie was found dead. His demise was officially ruled a suicide, but the circumstances were deeply suspicious, leaving the town reeling and whispering. Was Ron's death an accident, a tragic end to his desperation, or a cold-blooded murder orchestrated by the elusive letter writer? Circleville held its breath, the air thick with unspoken fear and unanswered questions. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The local authorities, after a perfunctory investigation, swiftly concluded that Ron's death was a suicide. They pointed to the overwhelming stress induced by the anonymous letters and the marital strife they had exacerbated, painting a picture of a man driven to despair. Yet within Circleville, doubts lingered like an acrid smoke. The community, already fractured by suspicion, found itself further divided. Some residents, clinging to the official narrative, believed the insidious letters had indeed pushed Ron to his tragic end. Others, however, whispered of foul play, their minds unable to reconcile the official verdict with the chilling circumstances of his demise. The very idea that the letter writer could have orchestrated such an outcome sent shivers down their spines, deepening the town's collective unease. Ron's death, rather than bringing an end to the terror, only served to intensify it. The anonymous letters, now steeped in a new, chilling venom, became more frequent, their accusations sharper, their threats more explicit. Mary Gillespie, already reeling from the loss of her husband and the public humiliation, found herself elevated to the primary target. The letter writer, emboldened and seemingly untouchable, accused her not only of the affair with Gordon Massey, but now, with horrifying audacity, of complicity in Ron's murder. Each new missive claimed to possess the undeniable truth behind Ron's death, promising to expose her darkest secrets. Fear, cold and pervasive, tightened its grip on Circleville. No one felt safe. The once friendly exchanges at the local grocery store or the town square were replaced by furtive glances and hushed conversations. Suspicion, a corrosive acid, turned neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend. Businesses, once bustling with local chatter, saw their patronage dwindle as social gatherings became rare, shadowed by the invisible threat. The anonymous writer seemed to possess an almost omniscient knowledge. Their presence felt everywhere, their eyes seemingly watching from every window, knowing everything. Mary's struggle became a public spectacle of anguish. She faced not only the relentless barrage of anonymous accusations but also the condemnation of a significant portion of the town, their judgment fueled by the letter writer's relentless campaign. Her children, innocent victims in this unfolding nightmare, were harassed at school, taunted with cruel whispers about their mother. Her home, once a sanctuary, was vandalized, crude messages scrawled across its walls, a testament to the hatred festering within the community. Despite the overwhelming pressure, Mary maintained her fierce innocence, adamantly denying the affair with Massey and vehemently rejecting any involvement in her husband's death. Her resolve, however, seemed to do little to sway the court of public opinion. Law enforcement, overwhelmed and frustrated, found themselves in an impossible position. Multiple attempts to trace the origin of the letters failed, each lead dissolving into thin air. The writer's cunning methods left no physical evidence, no fingerprints, no discernible clues. The police, criticized by a public desperate for answers and justice, were left to grapple with an invisible enemy, their resources stretched thin, their credibility eroding with each passing day. Then a new, more sinister dimension emerged. The letters began to threaten the exposure of even more town secrets, hinting at a web of deceit far larger than anyone had initially imagined. The writer, seemingly enjoying the chaos they had wrought, alluded to a deeper conspiracy, a more profound motive that transcended mere marital infidelity. Who was this phantom tormentor, and what deep-seated vendetta drove them to systematically destroy an entire community, one anonymous letter at a time? Circleville braced itself, knowing that the nightmare was far from over. The relentless torment became an unbearable weight for Mary Gillespie, threatening to crush her spirit entirely. The constant accusations, the public shaming, the destruction of her family's peace, it all coalesced into a desperate resolve. She could no longer simply endure, she had to fight back. Driven by a fierce need to unmask her tormentor and reclaim her life, Mary conceived a dangerous plan. She would set a trap, hoping to ensnare the elusive letter writer who had wreaked such havoc upon her and the entire town of Circleville. With trembling hands and a heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination, she placed a small, booby-trapped pistol inside her mailbox, a desperate gamble intended to catch the perpetrator red-handed. Her trap, audacious in its simplicity, was soon sprung. A package arrived, nestled within the mailbox, and as Mary approached it, a mechanism inside the box was triggered. The package itself was addressed to her, a chilling confirmation that the letter writer was indeed making a direct move. The police were immediately summoned, their previous frustrations giving way to a glimmer of hope. This was a physical lead, a tangible event in a case that had been defined by its elusive, shadowy nature. This incident, for the first time, provided a concrete point of investigation. The investigation quickly zeroed in on Paul Freshour, Mary Gillespie's former brother-in-law. Paul was apprehended, and a gun found in his possession was determined to be the very weapon used in the mailbox booby trap. This discovery sent shockwaves through the community, as the pieces of the puzzle began to seemingly fall into place. Further forensic analysis, particularly handwriting comparisons, provided what authorities believed to be irrefutable evidence. The distinctive script, the accusatory tone, the intimate knowledge of town secrets, all seemed to point to Paul Freshour as the Circleville Letter Writer. The motive, the prosecution argued, was clear: a simmering resentment stemming from Mary's alleged affair with Gordon Massey and the subsequent tragic death of Ron Gillespie, Paul's brother-in-law. Paul Freshour steadfastly maintained his innocence, vehemently denying any involvement in the letters or the booby trap incident. He insisted he was being framed, caught in a web of deceit far more complex than anyone understood. Yet, the evidence against him, though circumstantial to some, was compelling enough for the court. The prosecution painted a vivid picture of a man driven by anger and a twisted sense of justice, meticulously building a case that resonated with the community's desire for answers and an end to the terror. Despite Paul's fervent pleas, he was convicted and sentenced to prison. A collective sigh of relief swept through Circleville. The nightmare, it seemed, was finally over. The anonymous letters, which had plagued the town for so long, ceased their insidious flow. For a brief period, an unsettling calm descended upon the community, a quiet testament to the belief that justice had been served and the culprit apprehended. Most residents firmly believed that Paul Freshour was indeed the tormentor, and his incarceration brought a long-awaited sense of security, allowing them to tentatively begin rebuilding their shattered lives. Mary Gillespie, though experiencing a profound sense of vindication, found herself unable to fully embrace the return to normalcy, while the conviction of her former brother-in-law brought a measure of peace. An underlying unease gnawed at her. Could one man truly be responsible for such widespread terror? The meticulous planning, the intimate knowledge, the sheer audacity of the letters, it all seemed too vast for a single individual, even one driven by such powerful emotions. Some townspeople, mirroring Mary's quiet doubts, also harbored reservations about Paul's sole guilt, their suspicions lingering like a stubborn fog. The seemingly definitive resolution felt strangely hollow to a few, a subtle discord in the symphony of relief. With Paul Freshour now behind bars, the town hoped the nightmare had ended. But a chilling new development was about to suggest that the terror was far from finished, and the true orchestrator of Circleville's suffering might still be lurking in the shadows. The unsettling calm that had tentatively settled over Circleville was shattered by an impossible reappearance. Just when the town had begun to exhale, believing the phantom tormentor was safely behind bars, the letters started again. They bore the same distinct characteristics: the familiar, unsettling script, the intimate knowledge of local gossip, and the venomous accusatory tone that had terrorized the community for so long. These new missives targeted the very same individuals who had suffered before, reopening wounds and rekindling fear. Crucially, these new letters arrived after Paul Freshour's incarceration, a chilling fact that sent a ripple of profound dread through the already traumatized town. From the confines of his prison cell, Paul Freshour vehemently denied writing these new letters. His pleas, once dismissed as the desperate cries of a guilty man, now carried an unexpected weight. He argued that these continuing threats were irrefutable proof of his innocence in the original crimes. He had become a victim of the very letter writer he was accused of being, trapped in a nightmare of false accusation, while the true culprit continued their reign of terror. His desperate assertions, once ignored, began to resonate with those who had harbored doubts about his conviction. Circleville was plunged back into a suffocating shroud of panic and confusion. If Paul was innocent, then who was the real letter writer? The question hung heavy in the air, poisoning every conversation, every interaction. The police, whose previous conviction had brought a semblance of order, were now baffled, their hard-won victory tainted by this impossible turn of events. Their credibility, already fragile, crumbled further as the community questioned their initial investigation and the validity of the evidence presented. The justice system itself seemed to be mocked by an unseen hand, a shadowy figure pulling strings from the darkness. Mary Gillespie, who had only just begun to piece her life back together, found herself plunged back into renewed torment. More letters arrived, taunting her about Paul's imprisonment, mocking the town's gullibility, and hinting at a deeper game being played. Her sense of closure, so fragile and hard-won, was utterly shattered. The vindication she had felt quickly dissolved into a gnawing fear that the nightmare was far from over, and perhaps had never truly ended. The writer seemed to delight in her renewed suffering, proving their enduring power over her life and the lives of everyone in Circleville. The bizarre and increasingly complex case attracted national attention. Reporters descended upon Circleville, their cameras and microphones highlighting the town's plight, broadcasting its fear and confusion to a wider audience. The story of the anonymous letter writer who continued to strike from beyond prison walls became a media sensation, deepening the mystery and sparking countless theories. Was it an accomplice? A copycat? Or had they imprisoned the wrong man entirely? The unseen hand behind the letters remained frustratingly elusive, despite the intense scrutiny from both law enforcement and the media. The possibility of an accomplice, someone working with or on behalf of the original writer, was considered, but offered no concrete leads. The idea of a copycat, someone inspired by the original terror to continue the torment, was also floated, but the consistency of the style and content made it seem unlikely. The letter writer's return after Paul's conviction shattered all previous assumptions, hinting at a far more complex and insidious truth, one that Circleville was nowhere near uncovering. The fear was palpable, a cold, creeping dread that permeated every aspect of daily life, reminding everyone that the true orchestrator of their suffering still lurked in the shadows. Law enforcement, now under immense public and media pressure, faced the uncomfortable reality that they had to re-examine the entire Circleville case. Their earlier triumph had dissolved into a humiliating question mark, forcing them to pursue new leads and explore previously dismissed theories. Detectives, their faces etched with a mixture of frustration and renewed determination, meticulously sifted through old files, hoping to unearth a forgotten clue, a missed detail that might explain the impossible continuation of the letters. Every witness was re-interviewed, every timeline scrutinized, but dead ends seemed to multiply, each one deepening the labyrinthine mystery. A renewed focus fell upon the distinctive handwriting of the Circleville writer. Handwriting experts, some brought in from outside the state, were tasked with re-evaluating every sample, comparing the letters sent before Paul Freshour's incarceration with those that arrived after. They looked for the slightest inconsistency, the most subtle variation that might betray a second hand at work, or perhaps reveal a cunning mimicry. The peculiar loops, the aggressive slants, the unique formation of certain letters, all became subjects of intense forensic scrutiny. Was it an evolution of penmanship, or the telltale signs of a different author altogether? The experts debated, their professional opinions often conflicting, leaving the police no closer to a definitive answer. Within the beleaguered community of Circleville, the divisions deepened, festering like an open wound. Some residents, now convinced of Paul's innocence, rallied behind him, believing he had been a convenient scapegoat for a deeper, more sinister plot. They whispered of a grand conspiracy, of local figures protecting their secrets, manipulating the justice system to silence an inconvenient truth. Others, however, remained steadfast in their belief that Paul was the culprit, suggesting he must have an accomplice on the outside, someone executing his vengeful commands from behind prison walls. Trust, already a fragile commodity in Circleville, eroded further as paranoia became rampant. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion, wondering who among them could be capable of such sustained cruelty. From his prison cell, Paul Freshour waged a tireless campaign for his freedom. The new letters, once a source of terror for Circleville, became his most potent weapon. He used them as irrefutable proof of his innocence, his voice hoarse with the injustice of his situation. His family, though small in number, and a handful of loyal supporters, rallied behind him, amplifying his pleas to anyone who would listen. The emotional toll of his wrongful imprisonment was starkly evident on his face. The years behind bars had etched lines of despair and weariness, transforming him from a robust man into a shadow of his former self. He clung to the hope that the truth, however elusive, would eventually set him free. The reinvestigation, however thorough, failed to answer the most critical questions. Who had possessed such intimate knowledge of Paul's personal life and circumstances to frame him so perfectly, to plant a weapon that would seal his fate? What was the true underlying motive behind the initial barrage of letters? A motive that seemed to transcend mere marital infidelity? The possibility of multiple writers, or an intricate network of conspirators loomed large, adding layers of complexity that the small-town police force struggled to unravel. Every avenue seemed to lead to a dead end, every promising lead dissolving into thin air. As the months turned into years, the trail grew cold. Despite the renewed efforts, the letter writer's identity remained an impenetrable secret. The anonymous letters eventually tapered off, their frequency diminishing until they ceased altogether, leaving behind a silence that was almost as terrifying as the threats themselves. The fear, however, remained. It was a pervasive, lingering dread, a chilling reminder of the unknown tormentor who had held an entire town captive. The case, once a blaze of public interest, slowly faded into obscurity, becoming another unsolved mystery in the annals of American crime. As hope for a definitive resolution dwindled, a shocking revelation about the letter writer's true nature threatened to expose a betrayal that went deeper than anyone in Circleville had dared to imagine. A betrayal that would forever scar the quiet Ohio town. The shocking revelation, however, never fully materialized in a way that offered definitive public closure. Instead, the case of the Circleville Letter Writer faded into a kind of unsettling limbo, its tendrils of suspicion and fear continuing to grip the town, even as the immediate terror subsided. Years later, after navigating the convoluted legal system and serving a significant portion of his sentence, Paul Freshour was eventually released from prison on parole. He emerged a broken man, his spirit scarred by the injustice he felt, his life irrevocably altered by the ordeal. To his last breath, he steadfastly maintained his innocence, a living testament to the enduring mystery and the profound impact of false accusation. His freedom, while a personal victory, did little to quell the pervasive questions that haunted Circleville. Mary Gillespie, the primary target of the initial barrage of letters, never truly recovered from the unrelenting public scrutiny and the personal attacks that had defined years of her life. Her reputation, once untarnished, remained permanently stained by the accusations, whispers, and the tragic death of her husband, Ron Gillespie. She carried the heavy burden of unresolved questions, forever wondering who had orchestrated her torment, who had so cruelly exposed her life to public judgment and private anguish. The peace she once knew in Circleville was shattered beyond repair, replaced by a constant vigilance and a lingering sense of unease. Her days were marked by the ghost of anonymity, a phantom tormentor whose identity remained just out of reach. The town of Circleville itself was forever marked by the Circleville Letter Writer saga. It became a permanent fixture in its collective memory, a cautionary tale whispered through generations. The once close-knit community struggled to regain its former innocence. A deep-seated sense of unease, a pervasive distrust, continued to linger beneath the surface of daily life. Neighbors, once quick to offer a helping hand, now harbored silent suspicions. The story became a dark legend, a testament to how easily a community could be fractured, its foundations eroded by the insidious power of anonymous terror. The idyllic facade of small-town America had been irrevocably cracked, revealing the darker currents that could flow beneath. The true identity of the Circleville Letter Writer remained officially unsolved, a tantalizing enigma that continued to fuel numerous theories and endless speculation. Even decades later, the conversations persisted, dissecting every detail, every potential suspect, every motive. Was it a lone individual, consumed by a personal vendetta against Mary Gillespie, or perhaps against the entire town? Or was it, as some still believed, a conspiracy involving multiple individuals, carefully orchestrating a campaign of psychological warfare? The lack of definitive closure left a profound and lasting impact on all who had lived through the terror. a wound that refused to heal, a question that refused to be answered. The Circleville case stands as a chilling testament to the destructive power of anonymous communication. It highlights the immense psychological damage that can be inflicted upon individuals and an entire community when veiled threats and accusations are allowed to fester. It forces a somber reflection on the nature of justice, the elusive pursuit of truth, and the unseen forces that possess the terrifying ability to tear lives apart with nothing more than words on a page. The saga reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous weapons are not guns or knives, but the carefully crafted words of a hidden enemy. The final, chilling thought that permeated Circleville, and indeed the minds of those who followed the case, was the possibility that the Circleville Letter Writer might still be out there. Their identity, their motive, their true nature, all remained a secret, perhaps forever. The phantom menace, having sown chaos and destruction, simply vanished back into the shadows, leaving behind a legacy of fear, suspicion, and an enduring question mark over the heart of an Ohio town. The quiet streets of Circleville had learned a harsh truth. Some mysteries refuse to be solved, and some shadows once cast linger for a lifetime.